is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopia's government declares national mourning after coup attempt. Chinese foreign minister meets African counterparts in Beijing. And Sudan Military Council says mediation needs to be unified. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. More than 400 pilots join a class action lawsuit against embattled American plane manufacturer Boeing. And in sports, Dakar in celebrations as Africa's top-ranked team, Senegal, gets off to a winning start at the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt. We start the hour in Ethiopia, where the country has declared a national day of mourning to mark the deaths of 4 top officials in what the government is saying were coordinated killings as part of a coup attempt in the northern Amhara state. On Saturday night, an officer and the chief of staff of the army, General Sier Mekonnen, were shot dead by his own bodyguard in the capital, Addis Ababa. In Amhara itself, the regional governor, Abachu Mekonnen, was killed along with his senior advisor. The federal government says the coup attempt had been led by the head of the security in Amhara, who is said to be on the run.
In a measure they took against the region's leadership who were on a meeting, the region's president, Honorable Dr. Abachu Mekonnen, and his advisor, Mr. Azezu Wesie, have lost their lives. Mr. Migbaru Kebede, another member of the leadership and the region's general attorney, who was also in the same meeting, was wounded and is receiving care at hospital. In parallel to this, with a difference of few hours, the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Siare Mekonnen, along with his friend, a retired Major General Gezai Abera, both lost their lives in an organized and coordinated attack by the bodyguard.
All right, we are joined by Dr. Francis Onditi, a conflict resolution expert and head of the Department of School of International Relations and Diplomacy, Riara University, here in Kenya, Nairobi. Doctor, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. First things first, let's dig into it, Doctor. Ethiopia's army chief and top regional officials were killed in a northern coup attempt. What does this really mean, though, for the stability of Ethiopia?
We would say, Richard, the country Ethiopia is undergoing what you could call a crossroad. It is a crossroad because on one side, the Prime Minister Abiy has been very much very earnest of bringing reforms, economic and political reforms in that country. But on the other side, we seem to be having a dissent that is coming very, very quickly from different communities. What has happened in the Amhara region, I think it's an unfortunate situation. It's likely to really mitigate against the efforts that the Prime Minister has been putting in place. But having said that, I think Ethiopia with the coup d'etat, it's not a new thing. It's something that used to happen several decades ago. But for this particular situation, I think one of the things that Ethiopia Prime Minister has to do is to relook into the, the federal arrangement or federal government structure that exists, because seemingly some federal states feels like they are excluded out. What we are seeing are just symptoms of dissent or symptoms of feeling that they are not part and parcel of the reforms or the government that Prime Minister Dr. Abiy formed in that country.
Dr. Onditi, let's talk about this a little more, though. Ethiopia's administration has named General Asamnu Sige as being responsible for the foiled coup. Now, he was released from prison just last year, and having been given amnesty over a similar coup attempt. I mean, what does this really mean for PM's reforms? Can you speak to us about that?
Yeah, the PM is caught actually between the hard place and a rock, because as much as he would want to extend the olive branch, that part of the reform is to make sure that the people who were jailed without a trial are brought out. But at the same time, the realization or the indication that we are getting out of this picture is that they are not appreciating the effort that the Prime Minister is trying to put across. And therefore, the hangovers of socialism is very ripe in Ethiopia. As much as the Prime Minister would want to have reform and being a Democrat and trying to see whether the country changes its political regime, it's going to be a little bit tougher for Dr. Abiy. Yeah.
Well, the elections are just right around the corner. I want to ask you what impact you think this coup will have on that, and what will the Prime Minister's actions be going forward, would you say?
We are likely to see quite a number of unrest in different spots of that country. It's not going to rest right now, especially now that the country is gearing for elections. Perhaps what the Prime Minister needs to do is perhaps to concentrate more inside and try to see how the different federal states or federal governments can strengthen their political will, and perhaps try to see whether the representation from different federal governments it's made more stronger. Because what he did was trying to look at the country from a national perspective. Forgetting that the country Ethiopia is really a federal state, which means you need to strengthen the federal government more than even the national government. If you don't do that, then you're likely to experience challenges that Dr. Abiy is going through right now.
All right, Dr. Francis Onditi, we have so many questions, but so little time, and we'd like to thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. That was Dr. Francis Onditi, conflict and resolution expert here in Nairobi. Moving on, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China is willing to work with African countries to build high quality and sustainable relationships and deepen cooperation in infrastructure, agriculture, healthcare, telecommunications, and energy. He made the remarks in a meeting with 8 African foreign ministers in Beijing. The delegates are in China for a coordinators meeting on the implementation of last year's Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Wang met with foreign ministers of Sierra Leone, Gabon, the Republic of Congo, Sao Tome and Principe, Cameroon, Somalia, Madagascar, and Senegal on Sunday. During the meetings, Wang also said that China and African countries should put into practice the results of last year's summit.
The Forum on China-Africa Cooperation was successfully held in Beijing in September last year. We have been actively implementing the outcome of the forum and reaped early harvests. Through the coordinators meeting, we hope to review the achievements of China-Africa cooperation and work together to plan the next phase of implementation.
All right, for more on this, CGTN's Wang Mengzhen joins us for more on the summit in Beijing. Wang, what can you tell us about the FOCAC coordinators meeting taking place in Beijing?
Well, more than 80 ministerial-level officials from Africa have arrived in Beijing for the FOCAC coordinators meetings from June 24th to 25th, which includes 24 foreign ministers from these African countries. So as one of the key follow-up action of the Beijing summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation last September, this coordinators meeting is a major chance for China and African countries to deepen their strategic cooperation. Earlier Monday, Chinese and African officials have gathered in the Chinese capital for a dialogue between executives of Chinese financial institutions and African coordinators. Tuesday or 25th of June, the meeting will have its opening ceremony tomorrow and detailed discussions. Later that day, there will also be a joint press conference on the achievements of these coordinators meetings. And officials from China and African countries will witness signing of of even more cooperation agreements, or MOU, based on the implementation of the joint projects or proposals agreed during the Beijing summit. And earlier, I also got a chance to sit down with some foreign ministers from these countries, including Lesotho, Zambia, and Namibia. And foreign ministers from Lesotho told CGTN that 4 more MOUs on infrastructure building will be reached during the 2-day meeting. Zambia said agreement on more debt relief will be hammered out, while Namibia said there will be more collaboration in infrastructure and healthcare. On Sunday, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi already met with foreign ministers from 8 African countries and are expected to meet more foreign ministers tomorrow, vowing to build a high-quality and sustainable relationship with African countries. Back to you.
Thank you, Wang Mengzheng, talking to us from Beijing. Thank you once again for that update and report. Moving on, Sudan's ruling military council on Sunday appealed to the African Union and Ethiopia to unify their efforts in outlining a blueprint for a political transition in the crisis-hit country. The military generals and the opposition coalition have been wrangling for weeks over what form Sudan's transitional government should take. CGTN's Laura Walubengo is following those developments.
Sudan's military generals seized power after ousting President Omar al-Bashir in April. Since then, the council, members of the opposition groups and the country's citizens have been at loggerheads over the formation of the transitional leadership. Protest leaders have called for a civilian majority ruling body. But talks between the generals and the coalition collapsed on June 3rd when security forces stormed a protest sit-in outside the Defense Ministry. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the African Union have been trying to mediate between the sides.
The head of Sudan's military council has affirmed to the Ethiopian mediators that mediation efforts should focus on preparing a joint proposal to bring together different points of view, and those mediation efforts to produce proposals that are open to negotiations, not based on solutions put forward beforehand. The African Union proposal represents both sides, and both sides have accepted it because it's open for negotiations, especially that it's backed by many parties, including the European Union.
The makeup of the Sovereign Council was the main outstanding sticking point between the two sides. A draft of the Ethiopian proposal suggests that the ruling Sovereign Council should be made up of 7 civilians and 7 members of the military, with 1 additional seat reserved for an impartial individual.
The head of Sudan's military council said that presenting the Ethiopian proposal in this way gives the impression that the military council does not accept the agreement while it's approved by the other side, as it was announced. This is not true, and it misleads the public opinion. The head of Sudan's military council affirmed that Sudan is an independent state who does not accept orders from abroad or solutions put forward in advance, which threaten national security and do not enjoy major consensus of all political components.
On Saturday, Sudanese protest leaders say they have accepted the creation of a civilian majority governing body for a political transition as proposed by an Ethiopian envoy. The ruling military council has yet to give its decision and says it will meet a representative from the European Union on Wednesday. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
And the news continues on Africa Live. We've got a lot more stories coming your way. Stay tuned.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Ucheoko reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN, See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Guinea-Bissau President Jose Mario Vaz has appointed Aristide Gomez as prime minister, ending a political deadlock that had dragged on since legislative elections in March. Vaz defied pressure to appoint the leader of the main parliamentary party as prime minister, reappointing the previous premier just hours before his own mandate expired. The decision comes days after the Economic Community of West African States threatened sanctions against the country if it did not put its house in order. Vaz's 5-year rule as president officially ends on Sunday. After that date, he would not have the powers to appoint a premier.
Sou o primeiro presidente da República.
I am the first president of the Republic who has concluded his mandate. This is a historic event full of significance and symbolizing a process of consolidation and stability of our democratic system.
No processo de consolidação e estabilização.
Mauritania's government-backed candidate Mohamed Ould Ghazouani is the country's new president. The Electoral Commission declared Ghazouani the winner late on Saturday with 52% of the vote. His nearest rival, Biram Da Abid, came second with 18.58%, while Mohamed Ould Boubacar settled for third place with 17.85% of the vote. But opposition candidates are crying foul, saying they will contest the results.
Mauritania's Mohamed Ould Ghazouani win cements the power of a ruling party in a country of about 4.5 million people. The elected leader has campaigned on continuing economic and security progress made under outgoing President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz. But he's not new in government. He once headed the country's domestic security staff, and at one point he served as the chief of staff to Abdelaziz.
We are happy that the candidate Mohamed Sheikh Mohamed Ghazouani won in the first round with 52%.
We worked for this in the first round.
The opposition has rejected the results, saying they do not express the will of the Mauritanian people.
We, the candidates of the United Democratic Opposition, mindful of the need to pull our people out of the dictatorship, of division, of impoverishment, of mismanagement, we are united and we will stand by the side of the people in its challenge of the results. We will lead this challenge and we will pay the price that has to be paid to liberate our people from the oligarchy that oppresses it.
The country's electoral commission confirmed Ghazouani and urged all candidates to maintain calm. The 22nd of June election is the first in Mauritania's history since the country gained its independence from France in 1960. It follows President Abdelaziz's decision to step down after serving the maximum 2 5-year elected terms. The 62-year-old president is credited for stabilizing the country after a 2008 coup. The new president has vowed to maintain his legacy. Chamrono, CGTN.
Well, China has donated a high-speed computer to the Tunisian Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, which will be used during the academic year of 2019-2020. The new cooperation project is the result of the agreement signed by Tunisian Prime Minister Youssef Chahed and Chinese authorities in Beijing as part of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Our correspondent Adnan Shawalshi tells us more.
A cooperation agreement in the scientific research and technology field was concluded between Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research Slim Khalbous and Chinese Ambassador to Tunisia Wang Guanbin for the acquisition and installation of a high-performance computer at the Al-Khwarizmi Computing Center.
This is a very important agreement in the field of scientific research. Tunisia does not have the higher performance computer. It will be granted from China for a cost of about $10 million. This computer is very rare in Africa. It will be available to Tunisian and African research centers and laboratories.
Chinese ambassador to Tunisia noted that diplomatic ties have been strengthened between the two countries in recent years.
The agreement testifies to the tenacity of the Chinese-Tunisian ties. This year we celebrate the 55th anniversary of the establishment of the diplomatic ties between China and Tunisia. We are happy to cooperate with Tunisia on realizing this project.
The minister added that Tunisia and China are now preparing for the second edition of China Campus event that will host over 30 Chinese universities in September 2019.
Many Chinese universities will offer new opportunities to Tunisian students as well as scholarships. The event will be held at the City of Sciences from the 1st to the 4th of September.
The new Made in China computer will be used in applied scientific research in the various specialties requiring a speed and high capacity of computation, namely biotechnology, health, climate, and marine sciences.
According to the Minister of Higher Education, the Chinese grant has been welcomed by academics, scholars, and students. In addition, researchers from several research institutions across Tunisia will have access to the high-performance computer. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Presidents of Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire have agreed to promote and strengthen ties between their two countries. The two leaders have been meeting in Cote d'Ivoire during Senegalese President Macky Sall's two-day state visit.
President Macky Sall arrived in Cote d'Ivoire on Thursday. His two-day state visit was aimed at strengthening ties with Cote d'Ivoire. The two leaders exchanged views on bilateral relations and signed 5 cooperation agreements. President Ouattara acknowledged Senegal's role in the West Africa region and the entire continent.
The organization of the 10th session of the Ivory Coast Senegalese Joint Cooperation Commission has allowed for some progress, and we agree that we must explore sectors such as fisheries, culture, tourism, trade, defense and security, but also health, education, sports and youth. We must continue to organize economic prospecting missions.
Mr. President reminded us earlier of everything that binds our two countries, including bilateral cooperation, which is doing well, as he said. However, this can be improved, particularly in the areas of trade and private investment. Our businessmen could seize this opportunity to increase the level of trade in the field of agriculture, where Cote d'Ivoire boasts prime value. We are committed to increasing trade by strengthening the partnership between the private sector of both countries. We also discussed the possibilities of the two countries to share experiences and good practices in areas such as renewable energies, but also in the field of traditional energies, where Cote d'Ivoire is one step ahead of us.
Security and economic issues also dominated the talks. The trade talks come as West Africa looks to have one common currency.
We also addressed the issue of the implementation of the revised ECOWAS single currency roadmap. Obviously, monetary issues are sensitive but important issues, and we consider that WAEMO has served and is serving our states well, and that it must be an anchor point for developments in relation to this single currency. In fact, we will have the opportunity to raise this issue in Abidjan at the ECOWAS Heads of State Conference.
During the visit, Macky Sall also toured Cote d'Ivoire Power Generation Company. The plant has increased power capacity in the country since its inception. This is Macky Sall's first official visit to Cote d'Ivoire since his re-election in February. Chom Hono, CGTN.
South Africa's International Relations Minister, Dr. Naledi Pandor, says she sees her new post as both challenging and daunting. Dr. Pandor, who had earlier served South Africa as a Minister of Higher Education, a Minister of Home Affairs, and Minister of Science and Technology, says she is looking forward to working with the various international ambassadors to South Africa and building on relationships with their countries. Here is CGTN's Renee Del Carme with the details.
It was Dr. Naledi Pandor's first formal meeting as South Africa's new International Relations Minister. She called on the international community to work together to address the seismic challenges facing world leaders today.
We have to ensure that women enjoy equality, that children have access to education and opportunity, that populations do not suffer from civil conflict or indeed cross-border conflict, that communities do not experience hunger, that those who do not enjoy freedom finally get it.
Since the dawn of democracy in 1994, South Africa has spread its wings far and wide when it comes to international affairs. And it is said to have one of the largest diplomatic corps in the world.
It's a member of SADC, it's a member of United Nations, Security Council, it's a member of BRICS, a member of G20 and so forth. So it's representing us, the continent, in a number of international institutions. We, as a diplomatic corps, we're here to build the bridges with South Africa as a country, and we are ready to accompany South Africa to fulfill its mandate throughout these international organizations.
We have the very powerful delegation with about more than 40 major companies from China, 100 companies in South Africa, gathered together, we signed together 93 agreements for the procurement, for the investment, for the trade, and value at 27 billion rand, equal to about $2 billion US.
I believe we can rely on you because after all, we enjoy freedom today due in large measure to the support many of you gave us during our hard-fought struggle for freedom. The collaboration we secured then, the single-minded determination aimed at defeating apartheid, is required even more as we confront the issues of ensuring increased African prosperity and development.
A sentiment generally shared by the powerful diplomats in this room. Renat Al-Khan, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Over the years, contacts between Hunan and Africa have rapidly increased. The continent has become the largest share of overseas contracted projects from Hunan. With the deepening of China-Africa cooperation, more and more Hunan enterprises have created a landmark in Africa. The first of a series of the report, Hunan-Africa Friendship Ever Stronger, is focusing more on the Hunan engineering and construction in Africa. Let's take a look at that story.
The Africa Tower, built by the China Construction 5th Engineering Bureau in a desert 50 kilometers east of Cairo, Egypt's capital, will become one of Egypt's new landmarks. On July 22, 2018, the National Wrestling Arena in Senegal, a project undertaken by Hunan Construction Engineering Group, also known as HNCEG, was officially handed over to the Senegalese government. The landmark building has a total area of approximately 18,000 square meters and accommodates up to 20,000 spectators at a go.
When you go to Senegal, people there are happy with the Chinese government. This shows China's high speed, good reputation, and high quality.
In 2016, the National Road Number 1 in the Republic of Congo was launched. 3 of the phases of the total construction was carried out by the Hunan Road Bridge Construction Group, also known as HNRB.
The construction of the project has enabled us to better integrate into the local area and help solve the unemployment problems and improve the engineering skills.
Hunan's new constructed projects in Africa had reached a value of approximately $266 million on a turnover of $645 million. Many Chinese enterprises have also brought most advanced construction technologies to the region, making every project a platform where the Chinese and Africans can exchange and learn from each other. Chinese engineer Liang Zigang teaches Ugandan farmer Isaac how to operate an excavator at the Sino-Uganda Mbale Industry Park. Due to limited education, many local workers here have difficulty in understanding the complicated operation rules of excavators.
Give me a chance to learn the machine. I'm very happy to work with my Chinese colleagues.
As an important part of the Belt and Road Initiative, Hunan enterprises have left their mark on the construction projects and infrastructure in more than 20 African countries. including Guinea, Liberia, Tanzania, Kenya, the Republic of Congo, and Ethiopia. The human brand is becoming more and more transparent in Africa. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN.
Chirping of birds, sounds of whispering trees, burbling of streams. When sunlight sets the forest's leaves aglow, and waterfall surges down from the mountain, we see and hear the Earth's wondrous beauty. The Earth is meant to be appreciated, and the life of its inhabitants deserves our endless exploration. Come with CGTN to listen and see, in chorus of life, to marvel at nature and life.
All right, it's time for our business headlines. Let's take a look at the headlines coming up. More than 400 pilots in a class action lawsuit against embattled American plane manufacturer Boeing. Vodacom reaches a deal with the Democratic Republic of Congo over suspended 2G license.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit Japan this week to attend this year's G20 summit. President Xi is expected to meet his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump on the sidelines of the event to clinch a deal to end the bruising trade war between the two powerhouses. CGTN's Zhu Yun explains.
A strong supporter of multilateralism and a firm believer in free trade. That's the image China wants to show to the world at this week's G20 summit in Osaka. Assistant Foreign Minister Zhang Jun said Monday the President Xi's schedule in Japan will be a full one, including plenary sessions, multiple bilateral meetings, informal meetings with several countries and groups, and joint discussions on global development issues like the world economy and climate change. Zhang called the G20 a key platform for global policy coordination and said China hopes to contribute to a fruitful summit. He also called on other countries to uphold multilateralism and seek common solutions that rise above short-term interests.
China will work with all parties to firmly uphold multilateralism. The international community has fully recognized the repercussions of unilateralism, protectionism, and bullying practices. We have sent a strong message together to support multilateralism and to oppose protectionism. Under the current situation, the G20 summit should broadly uphold multilateralism, maintain international order based on international law, and safeguard international fairness and justice.
Hotly anticipated is an expected encounter between Chinese President Xi Jinping and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump at the summit's sidelines. The meeting is seen as key in solving the country's trade dispute. Senior Chinese officials say working teams from both countries are in communication on the possible solutions to their existing differences. And for Beijing, respect and mutual benefit are pivotal to the trade dialogue. China believes that both countries should stick to the WTO rules and that compromises should be made on both sides.
President Xi Jinping spoke to President Trump on June the 18th. The two leaders agreed to continue to communicate on the economic and trade differences between the two sides. Currently, the trade negotiation team of the two countries are implementing the important consensus of the two heads of state. As for China, we stick to the principles of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit. Mutual respect means respect for each other's sovereignty. The agreements should be beneficial to both sides, and each side needs to make compromises and concessions.
In the recent couple of years, the rising protectionism and unilateralism has brought both uncertainties and risks to the world economy. And now the senior Chinese officials hopes that G20 member countries could be conscientious of holding multilateralism in order to bring new vitality and momentum to the global economic growth. So Yun, CGTN, Beijing.
American delivery company FedEx has issued a second apology to Chinese tech giant Huawei for failing to complete a phone delivery. The firm claims that an operational error prevented the shipping of Huawei's phone from Britain to the United States, where it was meant to arrive. The Chinese telecom equipment maker is currently at the center of an ongoing trade dispute between the U.S. and China. Last month, it was placed on a trade blacklist by the United States, cutting it off from American-made components it needs for its products. Huawei is at the moment reviewing its ties with FedEx over the incident. Well, more than 400 pilots have joined a class action lawsuit against embattled American airplane manufacturer Boeing. In court documents quoted by the American media, ABC, the pilots allege that Boeing engaged in an unprecedented cover-up of the known design flaws of the MAX, which predictably resulted in the crashes of 2 MAX aircrafts and subsequent grounding of all MAX aircrafts worldwide. The plaintiffs allege that Boeing's decisions have caused them to suffer monetary loss and mental distress since the grounding of its troubled 737 MAX. Boeing recently announced an update for the plane system software, which is currently undergoing an approval process by the Federal Aviation Association. Africa's largest phone carrier by market value, Vodacom, has reached an agreement with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to end a standoff over the suspension of its 2G telecoms license. The Congolese government suspended the license in April, saying Vodacom Congo did not follow the correct procedures when it secured a 10-year renewal for its license in 2015. The telco paid about $16 million, but DRC's local tax authorities say the sum only covered for the extra spectrum and not the license extension. The Johannesburg-based mobile operator owns 51% of Congo's biggest mobile operator. It generated about 6% of Vodacom's total revenue of about $6 billion last year. Pay TV giant MultiChoice Group is planning to restructure its customer service model, leading to the possible loss of over 2,000 jobs in South Africa. The broadcaster says it's launching of a consultation process to cut about 2,194 positions in its South African unit. The realignment is a response to the changing behaviors of its customers, who are increasingly moving away from traditional voice calls and visits to walk-in centers. It is one of Africa's leading pay television companies. Shanghai has become the symbol of modernization since its liberation 70 years ago. One of the major reasons for its success is its maritime industry. The city has established itself as a business capital, retaining its top position as the world's busiest container port for the 9th consecutive year. With the details, here is CGTN's Yu Wen.
This is how Huanghua moves Shanghai's goods to the world and the world to Shanghai, loading and unloading shipping containers. But he never touches them. A few taps on the screen push the handle forward and a radio call. This is Yangshan Port, and its 16 cranes are the heart of the world's first fully remote control port system. It's all quite different from Huang's first job here.
It was exhausting when I used to be stuck in a small operating cab. The remote control system is a lot more pleasant and takes a lot of stress out of the job.
The 16 cranes behind me can handle over 10,000 containers a day. And if you look at the automated vehicles on the ground, they are moving containers to and from the storage zone and are entirely operated by autonomous systems. It's no surprise that Shanghai once again leads the country and much of the world in making maritime trade smarter. The city had always been a great seaport because of its position at the mouth of the Yangtze River, connecting the city to the Pacific Ocean via the East Sea. Even 70 years ago, it was a pioneer in maritime trade, man-powered maritime trade. The cargo capacity at Shanghai was around 1.5 million tons annually in the early 1950s, the largest of any port nationwide. When China began a 3-year period of economic recovery and consolidation in 1949, local governments took over the running of the nation's ports. They were placed under direct state ownership and management in the first 5-year plan, which ran from 1953 to 1957. The major trade goods at the time were coal and building materials. A major boost to trade came in the 1970s when China began re-establishing relations with a variety of nations, including 2 major economies, Japan and the United States. Between 1973 and 1978, Shanghai built 24 new shipping berths, as well as renovating older ones. In the 1980s came the country's reform and opening up, and a resulting explosion in trade volume, which overwhelmed the existing ports. Shanghai declared clearing the ports to be a government priority and began introducing shipping containers and the equipment to handle them. The growth may have been robust, but cargo was still handled in the old way. Shou's son is now the general manager at the shipping company and recalls when there were 14 docks along the Huangpu River until the late 20th century when the ships got too big for them.
In the early 1990s, the ships docked along the Huangpu River and the cargo was carried off into the warehouses. Then we needed to figure out which warehouses your cargo was in and go claim it. It was all manual work and we were worn out. Now things are quite different, given that goods are being shipped in containers and we no longer have to claim them by ourselves.
Port modernization became a major focus of the Shanghai government in the 1990s. Shanghai International Port Group has primary responsibility for the city's upgraded maritime trade facilities. Founded in 1988, SIPG built and expanded the Yangshan Deep Water Port between 2002 and 2008. The conglomerate began the installation of smart port equipment in Yangshan in 2014. SIPG says Shanghai's container throughput for 2018 was over 40 million units. That's a worldwide record for the 9th straight year, and Yangshan accounted for some 44% of it. With the city established as a key and modernized international shipping center, port workers like Huanghua will be looking forward to handling even more of Shanghai's ever-increasing trade. Yuwen, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
The news continues on Africa Live. We have more inspiring, amazing, and wonderful stories coming up. Let's take a sneak peek at the headlines. Scientists cite climate change as Kenya's Wildebeest spectacle begins months earlier.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Tanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The wildebeest migration spectacle normally begins in mid-June and continues to September. But this year, the herbivores started their long trek at the end of May. Scientists attribute the phenomenon to the change in weather patterns, with the delayed rains disrupting the migration patterns. CGTN's Wildebeest Nyabo is following the event at the Masai Mara Game Reserve and has this story.
The animals graze on a sunny patch in the Serengeti overlooking the Masai Mara. Between these two sides is a river. When the annual wildebeest migration begins, the wildebeest will cross the river in hordes, an annual spectacle which draws thousands of tourists.
The last time I was here was right in the middle of the migration, which was absolutely awe-inspiring.
But the tourists gathered here today won't be so lucky. The beasts will not cross over to the other side today. The annual wildebeest migration is an eagerly anticipated phenomenon. Thousands of wildebeest making their way from Tanzania across the river and into Kenya. This year the migration began early and then stopped.
It is always difficult to predict when the migration will happen, or exactly which month they will come. But this year, somehow, they came a little bit unexpected, quite early.
The migration usually begins in mid-July. Ecologists have found that the crossing is connected to rainfall patterns. The wildebeest leave the Serengeti when the dry spell starts for the green pastures in the Mara.
So as a result of the dry weather in the Serengeti, the animals started moving into the Mara earlier than expected. We started seeing the first animals in the beginning of June, whereas we'd expect them early to mid-July. And then it rained in early June, and that sent all the animals back into the Serengeti.
It isn't the first time that this has happened. Erratic weather patterns have had an impact on the migration patterns in recent years.
The researchers that have been looking at it have said in the last 10 years, on average, the wildebeest are spending 35 days less per year in the Mara than they were in the past. And that's probably because of the weather.
This is attributed in part to global warming, with crucial water towers in danger. But in this area, environmentalists are working tirelessly to conserve the ecosystem, working to preserve it so that every year, at around the same time, thousands can assemble to marvel at the awe-inspiring spectacle that is the wildebeest migration. Wildebeest Nyabo, CGTN, Masai Mara, Kenya.
Well, over the weekend, a large yoga session was organized by the Indian Embassy in Senegal. This was to celebrate the International Yoga. Around 1,000 citizens in Dakar came to the Monument of the Renaissance to join the event. Some of them are regular practitioners, but many others came just for fun. The event was under the theme, Yoga for Peace and Harmony.
When I started in 2016, we had 600 people, but today you can see that we have a lot of people. So I think in Senegal you have started to have a lot of interest. Yoga is very good for our health and also for nature, because it teaches us how to live in harmony with nature and with our own bodies. So I think that for this reason, yoga is now very popular in Senegal.
We started a yoga program at all levels, from the primary school all the way to the high school. This is part of our physical education and wellness program. And really we want to start them young, gaining practices that help them to self-regulate themselves, get in touch with their emotions, understand how to focus better and how to calm their minds and their bodies.
We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't touch that dial. Don't go away. Here's what's ahead.